good, but he'll venture into town. You know, you'll catch him every now and then.
Yeah, and when you're doing that kind of TV show, I'm doubting 20 years later you're going to look that great. 10 to 20. I don't know where we're at now with that show.
That must have been early 2000s. So
yeah, let's not do that.
Good call, though, fair.
I was talking to one of my guys, my GM. He's younger, and I was talking about something back in the day, and then I realized that 20 years ago I was a teenager. As I was discussing, and it made my head just explode.
It's crazy, man. It's what is it? 2018 now. It's just I remember seeing that. I might even be a little bit young when Jackass came out. I was probably like just getting into high school at that point.
Now I'm really feeling old.
And so it goes. So it goes.
So I'm not sure how many people that watch this know who you are right now. So I'm going to have you kind of introduce yourself, just so we know a little bit more about you, and then we'll just kind of it's almost like a podcast, but it's more conversation than anything else. And I just want to find out more about you and what your beliefs are with training and coaching and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, of course. Well, most people who know me would know me as my whole brand or philosophy is this idea of generalism, right? So whether we're talking about coaching or business or fitness, I'm the guy you come to if you want to be better than most people at most things. I'm not the guy you come to if you want to be the best at any one. And what I have found in my life, and again, this is kind of a universal philosophy, both for training, business, and everything else, is skill stacking of being good to great at many different things, or at least fairly competent, and then learning to combine those skills is often far more powerful than hardcore specialization. And I know, at least for me, hardcore specialization was never even an option to begin with. I just wasn't going to be the best in the world at anything, especially fitness related. Was never going to be the strongest, the fastest, the leanest, but got really good and sometimes quite good at enough, and was able to combine them. That really helped me to gain a lot of initial attention, and a lot of people resonated with that message of generalism of, okay, I'm all right with not being the best in the world at any one thing, but I just want to be I want to maximize general physical preparedness. And so that's kind of what, helped me to gain a lot of traction in the beginning. One sec, actually. So a few people might also know me. I just have a number of these For Dummies books out where I kind of expand on the philosophy. They all have Paleo in the title, so just ignore the title. Dan John. Oh, there we go. I think Dan John's review sums it up. I couldn't have thanked him enough. He's like, it's great book with a terrible title. So, when I really first started publishing was when the Paleo thing was very big, and I had the opportunity to write these books. And the publisher's like, hey, we want to put out a book called Paleo Workouts. Are you interested in writing it? I'm like, I have no idea what a paleo workout is, but if you want me to talk about kettlebells and generalism, you can call it whatever the heck you want. So I often have to kind of caveat the books with that of here's what I'm actually teaching versus here's the title, but that's just the nature of the publishing industry. Anybody who's interested in how the sausage gets made. And then, from there, this philosophy really helped me with my business development and my coaching as well. I was never the best at any one thing in business, never the best copywriter, never the best advertiser, never the best salesperson, never the best in the world at any one thing. But I got good enough at all of these things that really helped me to build the business that I have now, which if people aren't familiar with me, it's really two things. I have my chroniclesofstrength.com website, and then the brand Strong On is sort of the whole generalist fitness philosophy that people can partake in at various levels. We have a site program where people get daily programming, challenges, things like that sort. And then, we have different levels of ascension there all the way up to coaching.
Awesome. So I knew stuff that I was going to ask you too. The book, that was one of the things is I love your book.
Thank you.
But I was like, what's the title? Because I don't understand what a paleo
Neither do I.
is. But I mean, it's basically minimalist training, right?
I begged him for a year. We went over this. I'm like, do not put paleo in this title because 7 years from now, however long, nobody's going to care about paleo anymore. They're just not. And I think we're almost at that phase, right? Paleo's kind of faded away, and now keto is the big thing. So I'm like, if you want this book to be perennial, which I do, like, do not slap paleo on the title. And like, we were both kind of right. They were right because paleo was such a big thing that it did sell quite a volume, build its momentum, and because of me, it continues to sell well. But then I always have to explain to people that I really don't know what the heck a paleo workout is, but you'll probably enjoy it anyways. So if you just get over the title. But I was right because we're seeing that shift, right? Paleo is like, I don't really see that many people talking about it anymore. Now it's kind of the keto is the big thing, right? And they did this with, this was my biggest frustration with publishing. And we could talk about traditional and self-publishing and the pros and cons there if that's something that people are interested in, is the lack of creative control. Because for my other book on fasting, they wanted to call it Fast Diets for Dummies, which I thought was pretty confusing. I wanted to call it Fasting for Dummies, which I thought was pretty clear. They said that sounded too religious. I'm like, all right, well, what about intermittent fasting for dummies? They said that sounded too confusing. So then it got Fast Diets for Dummies. So that's another book that, again, I think you'll very much enjoy, whoever reads it, but you have to just get past the title. So yeah, I will apologize and try to explain what's actually in the books as much as I can, but such is often the nature of working with publishers.
Can you, just speaking of the book, can you dig into it a little bit? Because I know you have a lot of like what your beliefs are in training, and I mean the workouts in there, some nutrition. There's a little bit of everything, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to give the encyclopedia version of it, but like some of the insights that you really wanted to get your message out in that book, and I think you did a good job doing it. So what are some of the main things that you think anyone watching that haven't read that book that they're going to get out of that?
Well, the first is what I already described with generalism, right? If you want to be the best in the world at any one thing, this is not your book. If you want to compete in powerlifting or something like that, there's just much better material for that. But if you want to focus on general physical preparedness or SPP, this is going to be a really good starting guide. And then the other kind of differentiating approach, I think, and you already hinted at it, is this idea of minimalism. I just did a podcast on where I was talking with Steph Gaudreau about this because she kind of minimalized a lot of her life. She got rid of her couch and all this or that. But that isn't my kind of minimalism. When I talk of minimalism, I'm really talking about that cross-section between effectiveness on the one hand and efficiency on the other. So the way I describe it in the book and elsewhere is effectiveness is doing the right things, right? And then efficiency is doing those things right. So when you really think about it, like, when would you not want to be a minimalist? When would you want to ever do anything or inefficiently? So it's almost, in a sense, an obvious, if not annoying truism, but it's worth reminding people. Many people, and something I present in the book is this idea of restriction. Certain thought experiments like, hey, if you only had 3 days to work out and 15 minutes a day to reach your goal, and you could apply this beyond fitness, you could apply it to business or coaching too, what would you do to make the most amount of progress in that time? And it's these little thought experiments that help you to see things through a minimalist perspective, that help you focus on those vital few efforts that will get the greatest amount of return. And not to say that the trivial many, all the other things that you could be doing aren't important, but it's in what ratio are they important? How are you going to prioritize your efforts to make sure you're as effective and efficient as possible? And I don't think it's ever something anybody can achieve absolutely. It's always going to be changing depending where you are in the process. But it's the approach and the mindset that I think is always worth coming back to, and that's kind of the central message I was trying to usher with this book.
Oh, that's awesome. There's even a book I'm reading right now. I mean, it's not anything to do with fitness, but it's called Pick 3. And they're basically how everyone talks about just the balance between life, work, fitness, all that kind of stuff. Have a balance every single day. But theirs is more, yeah, you do every single day. No one can do that. Pick 3 of them. Throughout the year, throughout the week, throughout the month, you're going to have to balance out. But it's pick instead of like chase 2 rabbits. And that's what it reminded me of, is like, hey, you can't be a bodybuilder, a sprinter, and all the same. You got to pick something, right? And then go for it.
Yeah.
And that's really what you're talking about.
And in my new book, I dig into this principle a lot more. So, and it's more about generalism. And what I say is an effective generalist is really a short-term specialist, meaning we don't want to go all in on one area for the rest of our lives. Doesn't mean that we can't use specialization as a tool to become a better generalist, and we should. And it's exactly to your point. If you want to improve overall, you're better off focusing on just one or two things at a time and really going all in on those, and then just time, right? So if you want to grow a business, like really focus on that right now. Don't let everything else fall away. Like you should still focus on maintaining everything else. But if you think that you're going to improve all areas of your life dramatically and simultaneously, you'll wind up going in a circle. You'll get almost nothing done. So it's almost like conjugated periodization, right? But applied to life in general. Focus on one or two things that you can dedicate the best energy and attention to every day, and surge in that direction for as long as needed while maintaining everything else. Once you've built that skill or your business or whatever it is, then that can go into maintenance mode. And then you can shift your direction and focus and surge on something else. And it's over time, by kind of fluctuating through these periods of surging here and maintaining there, that you really do build that sort of general, I don't want to say physical preparedness at this point, because it should apply to anything in life, but you become, the term I use is an expert generalist, somebody who really is better than most people at most things.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, because that's every client walking through the door, they don't bet. They think, hey, I read this in the magazine, I read that in the magazine, and their focus keeps changing instead of let's just focus on one or two things, maybe three, like you said, just push. And then I forget how your quote goes. Dan always quotes you on this though, but I love your what is it for? Basically, for general fitness, you gotta just keep going at it, right? Maybe you remember the quote that I'm trying to tell you right now.
I'll steal a quote from Dan. He'll forget that he said it, and then he'll steal it back from me. And I'll forget that I said it, and I'll steal it back. So who had originally I have no idea. But he has quoted me. I'll be like, no, Dan, like you're actually quoting yourself. You just don't know it. You're quoting me. I haven't quoted you.
But doesn't he say that anyway? Like after 3 times, like it's his.
Yeah, so he'll admit to that, and he is true on that. He'll absolutely do that. So,
speaking of too, like I mean, that's how I kind of got to know you, is Dan talking about you, right, and then researching a little bit more. How'd you guys meet?
Yeah, Dan's a phenomenal guy. I actually owe him a phone call. We met because me and my business partner of the in-house list we have were sponsoring a booth at an event that Dan was speaking at. And I was very young at this point. I was still in college, and I had just come out with my first self-published book. So before any of my forgiveness books or anything came out, and Dan came up to the booth and he asked if he could have one of my books, and obviously I said yes. I was a huge fan of Dan John. I read him when I was in high school. So this was kind of a big deal for me. I was very excited. I gave him the book, didn't think anything of it. I'm like, okay, I was actually embarrassed. I'm like, he's going to read this thing. He's going to hate it, right? Like, I wish that just didn't happen. No more than probably 2 hours later, he came back and said that he loved it. And he actually read a good chunk of it. And I could tell he had, because we were talking about a lot of the training concepts, about complexes and this and that. And long story short is, over that weekend, it was a weekend event. We started hanging out, sharing ideas, drinking whiskey, sort of blossomed into the friendship that we have now. And I owe the man an enormous amount of debt because it was, here I was, somebody who was just getting started in the industry, putting a lot of ideas out there. But then having Dan John endorse those ideas, who was obviously seen as an authority figure, and rightly so, immediately elevated my status, which is, there's definitely a lesson there, is making sure that you are networking and associating with the right, because one endorsement like that, can open up so many doors. Not only the number of people that then became receptive to my message just because I was endorsed by Dan John, but all the other people that I then became introduced to and networked with because of that friendship with Dan John. Extremely valuable to me. But yeah, all started just kind of that chance happening, him picking up my book, liking it. That started the conversation, and it thankfully has only evolved ever since.
Hey, You're right too, though. Like that, I mean, we appreciate Dan for lots of different things, but one of his big things is just networking and just giving a shit about everyone, right? And so if he believes in what you're doing, he's going to be your greatest promoter, but also like make the connections. I think you've done a really good job on that too. Like I'm on, I'm screwing up everything now that I'm on a call with you, but your Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on your Facebook group. I've got your emails. So you're feeding into it. Your YouTube channel is like very popular. How have you built all of that when most of these people don't see you physically, right? Like I know you still train and you still have like a one-on-one or group setting where you're actually at a club. You do a lot of online stuff, right?
Well, my business is almost entirely online. So a little bit of background. When I first started my business, it's started online. So in college, I was training a ton of people. I was teaching over 20 classes a week at one point, doing one-on-ones. This is how I paid to go to college, right? And then what happened was my Taekwondo coach, who owned a martial arts facility, Dragon Gym, asked if I wanted to, kind of start a little lifting kettlebell thing at the gym. So we started that, and while I was growing my online business, that grew simultaneously. But then there came a point where we were able to bring other people on, other instructors, staff, managers, etc. So I'm not directly a part of that anymore. I still own it. I still oversee it. That's all kind of run by the employees at the gym now. My focuses are entirely online. So I'm still training myself, I would hope. But I'm not doing any more. It's been years since I've done any like face-to-face personal training or things like that. But people don't often realize that I still manage and oversee and run an in-house facility that's been going on for almost a decade now.
How have you built such an online presence? Because I feel like it's very strong. Like people are very active on Facebook, and I'm not even part of the main group right now, right? So I'm sure that's a good feeder system for you. That's where they get to know you more.
Yeah.
They love the concepts, and then they start reaching out, and then you get them going on your online stuff. How have you built a culture when you don't get to see them like face to face, right? You do really
so
good
there's a number of things that are worth talking about here, I think. When it comes to culture, I think the one thing people forget is if you want to create a culture, you have to have something to have a culture around. You need some type of philosophy or movement. And people don't really sit down and think enough about this and think specifically, not only what is my philosophy, but what makes it different. So we established this right at the start of the conversation. I said, if you want to be the best in the world at any one thing, I am not your guy. Do not come to me for that, right? I'm the generalist. If you want to be better than most people at most things, then that's what Strong On is about. That's what Pat Flynn is about. The same thing. So generalism and minimalism, that is the culture and that is the brand. I think the first thing people need to think about is how do you create a philosophy that is not you, right? It's not Pat Flynn. I'm teaching it, right? But something people can not only gather around, but become excited about and want to promote. If you can do that, if you can create some type of culture or movement that people not only resonates with them, but then they want to go and promote to become evangelists for, I think that's step number one. I think that's a step that most people forget. They kind of have this kind of vague, general sense of what they do. I help people become healthier or more fit. And that's important, but it's not that exciting. You're never going to build a true culture around something like that. You need to go much deeper. And when we talk about branding, people make a lot of mistakes here. They think it's about a logo or a slogan or something like that. No, branding for me starts with a philosophy. What is the movement you're trying to promote? And is it something that other people are going to want to get behind? So that's where I would start with that.
Oh my gosh.
I think Sean had a couple of questions for you that was on the call at the very beginning with us.
John.
Perfect. Thanks. So I just want to say thanks for all the content that you've put out there, Pat. I come from a powerlifting and sports background. So when you talk about specializing,
My life.
powerlifting and then sports related, that's how my life's been. Dan and Nick introduced me to kettlebells, but then when I was getting ready for RKC, you can only get so intimidated by the snatch test and then realize as you talk about being a generalist and working it, your content of Chronicles of Strength was awesome, and it helped push me to actually enjoy kettlebells a lot more than I thought I would. Now it's a staple in my training.
Great. Thank you.
And yeah, no, for sure. I'm definitely, I think you call me a fanboy at this point. So following you on a regular basis. We've probably covered it a bunch, but why do you feel that the generalist, minimalist training is so important for like general population?
Yeah. The big thing that I would argue for is that there's a difference, first off, that we have to understand between fitness and health. Okay, that's step number one. Fitness is the ability to complete a task. Health is something like the ideal interplay and operations of the organs and bodily systems, right? Something like that. That's a rough and ready definition. And the problem that I see with a lot of fitness approaches, especially the hardcore fitness approaches, is they will seek to increase fitness often at an expense of health. So part of my philosophy is these things should never be mutually exclusive. And to the extent that you want fitness to be a lifelong or long-term endeavor, they can't be mutually exclusive, because at some point something's going to break, right? To give and fail. So generalism, I think, helps to reconcile these two things. So where one thereby supports another. Now there's a trade-off, and all of life is about managing compromise, right? I am not going to be the best powerlifter in the world unless probably until I'm willing. You may have even, and look, this the hard way too, with the still scream all the stuff that lessons myself, right? Same thing with being a football player. And I'm not saying that this is wrong. It's just we need the expectation up front. Like, what do you want? And most of the general population, like you said, they don't want to sacrifice their health for fitness, right? They actually want to improve their health through fitness. So if you want to be a specialist, if you want to be a football player or powerlifter, again, I'm not your guy. And part of having a brand and a philosophy is not only who you're for, but who you're not for, and being very upfront about that. So for most people, most of the time, they want to use fitness as a means to get healthier. But the problem is so many systems put these things at odds when they really shouldn't be at odds. So that would be my starting argument of why generalism makes more sense for the population, since we're trying to be the best in the world at any one thing. We no longer have to put fitness and health at odds. They can and should work together.
Mutually exclusive, mutually together. Gotcha.
Mutually compatible, sure, yeah.
And then, got to have a fanboy question in here. So you've made so many complexes. Like, my favorite complex that you have is the Great Devastator. Just
the Devastator, the Destroyer. There's a few versions of it, yep.
What's your favorite that you've ever created that's just either wrecked you, or that you feel like when you do it, you're like, man, I'm going to go back to that. I love that.
Yeah, probably that one. I really like the 9-minute workout too. And to give Dan John more credit, one of my favorites is one that he made, the armored one. And that's kind of the fun thing about complexes, is they can serve such a variety of purposes, right? The 9-minute workout and the Great Destroyer would obviously be very metabolic focused, right? A huge conditioning element. Whereas something like the armor building complex, lower reps, you can go a lot heavier with it. I like them all, and I should as a generalist, right? Because they all kind of serve a different purpose. But you're right in step with everyone else there, Sean. I mean, people constantly are begging for these horrifying kettlebell complexes, and I actually have to like pump the brakes a little bit. Like, no, you shouldn't be doing the Great Destroyer every day, every workout. That isn't why I put that thing out. But people, they experience it, and they have that love-hate relationship with it, and then they'll run with it. I like the 9-minute workout. For me, that's something, I have 3 kids. I'm often busy. Sometimes I don't get in the ideal training session I want, but I always have one kettlebell around. I know I'm going to just get a good, decent sweat and workout in, tire their muscles. I think people sometimes write that off too. We often get in this idea of training must always be training for something. But, sometimes I'm focusing on developing other things in my life. Fitness is more in a maintenance mode. Sometimes I just need to get a good workout in. I just need to tire the muscles. I just need to boost the endorphins, and that's it. I don't need to be progressing in my freestanding handstand push-ups this very moment. I can come back to that, right? And that's something where, a single arm kettlebell complex like that is often very appealing to me.
And I can tell you from my experience, there's no way you're doing the Great Destroyer multiple times in a week. It's not happening.
No way. And every time. So oftentimes I'll only do that when I film it, and that's it.
Yeah, well, when Nick will test this, when we were prepping for the ARC-AC event, we were just running through complexes to get super familiar with the kettlebell even more. We would just pull out your 100 workout PDF and then just like randomly pick one and put it up on the TV in the team training room. And then usually after one of them, we were like, all right, I don't know if we need to do a second one. We're good.
Time for lunch. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's good. No, I mean, that's that PDF is it's like a buffet, right? So you can just dip your hand in the old sack, pull out work.
Have you got the doubles? It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then one last question for you. When you're designing complexes, is there like a system to it? Is there like, I want to hit this movement, I want to hit this type of movement? Or are you just kind of like throwing it around?
No, there definitely is, but this would be where we have to make a distinction, right? So for somebody who downloads my 101 kettlebell workouts, the first thing I say is pretty much what I just said to you, Sean, is like, if you're just grabbing these out of the bag, they're just workouts. This is not a systematized, periodized program here, right? But then when we move into Strong On, which would be my membership platform, then there is a systematized, periodized program there. So I'm not only looking at how the complexes are designed by themselves, but how they're utilized in the program. And I'm not always using complexes either. You know, I'll use complexes where I think it's the most effective and efficient tool for the job. Like if we're trying, I think complexes are best for conditioning, right? I do not think they're best for strength. Armor building is a good strength complex, right? But if you really want to develop strength, you know, the barbell, the rings, they're generally going to be better tools. The kettlebell is a good tool for like upper body strength, military pressing, but you're going to outgrow the kettlebell pretty quickly for a lot of lower body grinding strength moves. Very useful for the ballistics, heavy double clean, stuff like that. So I think just keeping a realistic perspective on the kettlebell is helpful. There's a lot of people who will just defend the kettlebell to the grave as being the ultimate tool for everything, and I just think that that's always going to be a losing argument. I think the best use of the kettlebell would be conditioning and mobility. And it's still good for strength in a lot of ways. And I do strength complexes, but where we can use other tools, barbells, body weight to further bring up strength, I'll rely on those as well. So that's kind of how, when I'm using complexes, I'm thinking more towards conditioning, mobility, maybe some strength, but then those would fit into, of course, a greater periodized program, depending on what phase we're trying to achieve. So for Strong On, there's different phases, and we're using this principle of short-term specialization. So we may have a phase where we're trying to focus a little more on strength, where you won't see complexes as much. Then maybe we'll have a conditioning phase where you will see it a bit more, or mobility, or so on or so forth. So if you were to look at Strong On at any one point in time, you'd probably think, wow, this looks like a specialization program. But then if you zoomed out over the course of a year, you would see how the general foundations are being built.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
They're good questions.
No, that's awesome to hear, because I was even going to bring that up. Is like, from first glance, you're the kettlebell guy, right? Mm-hmm. And that's still what you are. You're really good at the kettlebell, but that's not your only tool. You use several different pieces. It's just that, from what I've gotten from you, since you're doing a lot of online programming, that's the tool that's easiest for someone to have at their house, right?
That's right. Yeah, I like to say it's sort of like the Swiss Army knife of functional fitness. And part of it too is realizing, again, going back to the idea of general population, strong enough is strong enough. Do most people really need to be able to squat 2 48-kilogram kettlebells in the front squat for most of their fitness goals? Generally, no, right? They just don't. If you can get there, great. I mean, that's pretty tough. I don't even know. I would struggle to even squat 2 48s in the rack right now. I'm kind of a skinny dude. It's something worth thinking about that a lot of people I don't think about as much as they do. Like, how strong is strong enough? How strong do I really need to be for what my goals actually are? I think, first off, there's something to be said about too many people kind of just dive into fitness programs or things in general without thinking about their goals enough to begin with. So that's an exercise that's worth having, is the mental exercise. What do I really want to get out of a fitness program? What am I really doing this for? Sometimes people get caught in the rut of just chasing things almost arbitrarily. Strength is one. We see it all the time with strength, right? They'll just chase a certain number over and over and over, and they'll just keep elevating that number and never be quite satisfied with what they're getting. And I think part of that is they just haven't taken time to really assess their values on that. And I know from experience, I used to do that myself. Like I said, my elbows still pay for it. My back still pays for it a little bit when I used to do a lot of stuff with deadlifting in the rings because I just wanted to be stronger and stronger and stronger. But in both of those regards, I'm not as strong as I used to be. 7-8 years ago, I had a lot stronger of a deadlift than I do now. But that's okay. I've given that up, and I feel that I'm better off for it from all the other things that I've gained and also all the other things I've given up, like back pain and elbow tendonitis as well. So there's, kind of a mixed answer there. There's a lot to be said about that. But to your original point, yeah, I think most people, most of the time, can probably get all the strength that they really want or need for general fitness goals from just a combination of kettlebells and body weight. You don't need a barbell, even though it can be helpful. It can speed some things along. I would not say, well, honestly, I don't think any fitness tool is indispensable. I think even with just your own body weight, you can be strong enough. I think the kettlebell, if you're going to, like you said, if you're going to have one piece of equipment in your house that you can get a ton of mileage with, it's hard to beat the kettlebell. Barbell is good too, but most people aren't going to have one of those in their house.
I mean, that goes back to even what we do. We have a system. You know who CFSE is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we go through a lot of that at all our clubs. So we do our progressions, regressions, and so forth. But like you said, how strong is strong enough? Well, 80% of the people I train and most of our coaches are general pop. And we're just trying to get them move.
Yeah.
So move better, feel better, and look better, right? And like a progression to our squats, like our full progression would be front squats with the bar. But probably only 10% of our clients, like based on their goals, do I really need to even use that? It's not like wrong, but let's just do goblet squat, and if you get really strong, that's like double racket or something. But then I'm getting mobility in your hips, but I don't have to go all the way to the end spectrum. A lot of the clients seem to want to get there if they see it once. So I know you're working with a little bit different of a community, but how do you get over that hump? In like a gym setting, sometimes I have to have a conversation with someone if I'm training a small group. And one guy is fit enough and his goals mean, yes, let's do that front squat. Well, it's everyone else just to do goblet squats. But there's at least one person that's doing goblet squats that's not ready for front squats, nor maybe they need to. But we have to have a conversation because that's their goal all of a sudden. I see that guy doing it. I need to do that too.
Well, I think that you answered it. I think you need to have a conversation, right? So another good example of this is the snatch, right? A lot of people come in, they see the snatch, it looks cool, they want to do it. And look, I think the snatch is a great exercise, but if we haven't spent enough time with a one-arm swing, there isn't much reason to rush into the snatch, and it would be imprudent to do so. So furthermore, the question is worth asking is, what is the marginal utility of the snatch over the one-arm swing anyways? The answer is not very much, right? There's you definitely get something out of the snatch you don't get out of the one-arm swing. But most of the things you would want to get out of the snatch, you do get out of the one-arm swing. Development of the posterior chain, force production, things like that. You get a little more force redirection, some overhead stability work and things like that from the snatch. But again, it's marginal compared to what you're really doing these exercises for. So what is the solution to that? It's like anything else. I think it's education, making sure that the culture of the gym is well understood. What are we trying to achieve? What is the mission here? Right? It's not, strong lung culture is not a powerlifting culture by any means, even though we use certain powerlifting techniques. We know our goal is to just become better generalists. And then making sure that you are having some type of ongoing conversation and leadership from the top to get people to understand the value in process. One of the things that I'm constantly trying to remind people of is, hey, trust the process and don't rush the process, right? There's so much value in the process of going from A to B, from B to C, from C to D, rather than trying to go from A to F right away. Like, that's the mistake people make when you try to hop over all those intermediary steps. That's when you start accumulating bad habits, sloppiness of technique, injuries, all of that. So value the process. Learn to trust and appreciate the process, because the more you can, I don't want to say necessarily slow it down, but really dig into the process and be a part of it rather than always trying to just rush ahead to the next step. That's where the improvement is made, right, along the way, not necessarily at any one particular exercise.
Yeah. Sorry, it's like, she almost started crying.
Sorry, I was muted. Hey, I know I'm like going over your time a little bit. Do you mind if I ask you one more
Dude,
question?
man, we are good. Let's keep jamming.
So, it really interests me. So right now, I think we're doing a really good job in a big box gym. We have many locations right now. We're going to different markets. And we're doing a really good job of not just having trainers go all over the place where they have their own system or their own beliefs. Like, we're kind of trying to get on one path. And so it's not craziness in each gym. You kind of know what you're going to expect if you walk into any one of our locations.
Yep.
The one thing that we kind of stuck at right now, I believe, is our onboarding process. And we do okay. We do every movement as a screen, but we won't necessarily, we just do the 2 mobility from FMS. And then we kind of watch their movements for the other 5. But we don't dig in as well, I think, on their wants. We might dig in on their needs as a coach, asking for their wants as much as we should. Some coaches are better than others, but we're not leading that system. What's your onboarding that you do with your clients to kind of help that? Because if somebody is not bought in, you're not taking care of their wants, they're only going to last so long, right? Even if they're getting results, that's great. You're not dialed in on that. So how do you kind of take care of that?
Yeah, it's an important question, and I think it's one that people don't think about enough. So there's a couple things here. So maybe we can try and pull them apart a little bit. One is making sure that you're getting people to understand your brand at the very beginning, and that requires a conversation. So, I don't do any of the onboarding at the gym, but you could argue that I do all of the onboarding for people online, right? So a lot of it on a technical level is automated. When people first come into my world, they go through an automated sequence of emails and content, the job of which is to get them to understand generalism and why this is what they should want, right? So sometimes, or it is what they want, they just never phrased it that way. So there's that delicate balance that a coach has to learn to strike, and it is certainly more of an art than a science of leading people in what they want, but at the same time giving them what they need, right? So if you just push the needs and that's all you do, it might not resonate with people, it might not inspire them, and it might not want them to actually become customers or clients. But if you can identify, here are the wants, and here's how I can help you to achieve these things that you want, while at the same time giving you those things that you actually need. And sometimes they're aligned, sometimes they're not. And this is why, again, it's more of an art than a science. That is, I think, the secret and the recipe to success. Now, how you do that is obviously, that would merit at least another hour conversation by itself. But for the onboarding online, if you come in and you join the Strong On community, whether it's the Facebook group, but particularly my email list, which is where most of my business is conducted or done, the first thing you're going to go through is about a 1-week sequence where you're just getting steeped in the philosophy of generalism, and me trying to show you why everything that we just talked about, why this is the way ahead to success, to reconcile both health and fitness, to become better than most people, most things. And I'm getting, and the number one response I get from that is people just saying, yes, this is exactly what I want. I just never thought of putting it that way or phrasing it that way. In the gym, our employees are trained to essentially do what I do online, but with every single individual. And then, of course, on a more technical level with technique and stuff like that. So you can't just come into our gym and work out. This is not an open gym, right? Everything is systematized. When people come into our gym, there is, like you said, a very procedural onboarding process. We have an orientation. Part of that orientation is to introduce them to the concepts of strong on generalism, minimalism, to get them to see that this is the most effective and efficient way to their goals, to help them achieve and optimize both general physical preparedness and health, really selling them, maybe not monetarily yet, but at least psychologically, on the system itself, right? And then from there, they have another 1 to 2 week process where they are then begin to go a little bit deeper into the principles and the culture of the gym. But then we also ramp them up on a technical level, right? So that way they can enter in. So everything that we do online for Strongline is actually done in-house. So the same programming people get online is the exact same programming that our instructors teach at the gym. Now, if you've seen any workouts, they are somewhat technical. So, people are using kettlebells or doing swings, Turkish get-ups, things like that. So we need that onboarding process to kind of get their technique up to speed before they can just jump into a class, right? Safety is obviously a primary concern. But we use that as part of a onboarding and sales process, because one, it helps us to give them an intimate experience with one of the instructors that can introduce them to the philosophies and the principles behind the system, explain like how this will help them to achieve the things they want while giving them the things they need, and then actually teaching them the techniques and stuff, so that way when the time comes to join the class, they'll sign up and become members, but also be able to fully take advantage of it. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but it's having that onboarding process is essential, because otherwise, people, if they don't understand the culture, they're not going to buy into it. Or if they do buy into it and they don't understand it, they're not going to be very good advocates of the brand. So we not only want people to understand it when they come in, but to fall in love with it. So that way, when they're a part of it, they want to talk about it, they want to promote, and that takes an onboarding process, a process of education, and I would argue into a certain level of intimacy as well, however you want to define that.
No, I love that. I mean, you're basically saying I'm systemizing it, but I'm also getting buy-in, like, hey, this is why we do this. Is this right for you? And then once they decide, yes, this is right for me, then they're more bought in at the very beginning of what their wants are. And then you just have a deeper discussion, right? That's essentially what you're doing with it. And I think right now what we're doing in a big box gym is still good. We're doing really well as a business, but I still don't feel like we focus on that enough. It's more of like, just training's good for you, movement's good for you. We're going to help you burn some body fat and get stronger. And everybody knows, like, lifting weights, yeah, that's what I need to do, right? Some conditioning and lift some weights. And then that's what they get bought in, but they don't understand our culture of, like, train the body as one piece. That we actually have a system in a small group. You are getting individualized coaching, but it's based on what your need is and your wants are. So that's where I'm going to place you when you're within a small group. But not everyone explains the thing from our coaches. And so that's where we're kind of like not doing as great a job. And it sounds like you guys are doing better, where it's like, hey, yeah, that's what you need to do, but we have a system approach that this is how we do it every single time, instead of just randomly, if you're a good coach, that's what happens.
And there's a few things, that I would recommend for that. Obviously team meetings and hiring processes is extremely important. So if you're going to work at our gym, like, you're going to be a strong on instructor. There's no leeway there. You don't get to come into our gym and teach some other system, right? This is it. The other thing, we have a certification as well. So for people who want to be leaderships in the community or ambassadors of the brand, they can come to our certification. And the other thing is all the supporting material, branding material. So if people either join the online community or the in-house community, we give them the books, we send them to my podcast, we send them to my blog, we send them to my YouTube channel. So you have all these kind of pressing influences that are just steeping and shaping people in this brand of generalism as they're moving through the specific process itself, which should be steeping. You kind of surround them in this world as best as you can. So we have the staff that's doing it, we have the specific process that's doing it, and then we have all the supporting collateral around it as well. So we take the onboarding and the branding and the culture piece extremely seriously, and I think you really have to. And it's something that a lot of people who own gyms, you'll have to change it over time. I mean, when we first brought it into the gym, I didn't start with all this stuff figured out, right? We just started kind of like a general kettlebell boot camp, right? And that was cool. People liked that, but we realized that it wasn't enough, right? Like, people come in for the general excitement of kettlebells, but then if there was another kettlebell boot camp, they might go and do that or whatever. So we realized we needed a deeper culture, a deeper brand, and a deeper philosophy. So I don't want to make it seem like I had all of this at the start. I certainly didn't. It was something that we had to build piece by piece and shape over time. So I just wouldn't want anyone to feel like overwhelmed if you don't have all this in place. We certainly didn't either. It's something that has been a very cumulative effort.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks. I mean, sorry, I don't want to take your time. I'm going to ask one more question.
You're good, man. It's just fun, guys. I'm happy to have this, man. I'm glad you invited me on.
I think that's another thing you guys are really strong at, right? And that all lands on you is we're a big corporation. So we still have our social media, and we'll post things on Instagram, and even some knowledgeable stuff besides just the sexy. And we have a little bit on Facebook and so forth. But our story, I don't feel like we're really tapped into, and you're really good at, hey, this is who we are, this is our story, and even continuing that education process through, like, hey, I have my blogs, I have my YouTube channel, and I'm consistently telling our story and re-educating. How did you get to that point where it was not just, like you said, here's a boot camp, everybody loves it, but let's go deeper, because that helps your community too, right? Because now they're even more bought in.
Yeah. So I think I had somewhat of an advantage here where my background more formally is in the arts. You know, I have more of a background in writing and music than I actually do fitness. Like, fitness came later to me in life. I didn't start taking fitness seriously until kind of my late teens. I was very out of shape, very unhealthy. And this is part of the story that goes into generalism. My doctor told me when I was like 14 that if I didn't change the way that I was living, I could have a heart attack by the time I was 40, right? That was kind of a wake-up call for me. So fitness was actually a means for health for me at first. I was not intrigued in lifting a bunch of weight or any of that. I just wanted to not die, right? As a young kid, it really scares you. So, you know, I really started my blog before I started anything else. I was always writing. I was always kind of talking about my story, you know, what I was trying to get out of fitness. And, you know, of course, nobody read it for the first couple of years. I think that's always important to mention, right? People always see people at a certain stage and they want to compare themselves with this person where they are now, but really you should compare yourself with that person to where they were in relation to where you are now. Right. I mean, I wrote and I blogged for years, and, you know, maybe a few family members and friends read it, but that was it. But it helped me build the chops like anything else. Help me build my message, craft the philosophy, so to speak. So that way, when I did have the opportunities, I had those things polished and they were ready to present. So I think the content game, the education game, is essential, especially in today's environment. And the best time to get started on this is always yesterday. So I mean, I do a ton of stuff on this, and I wouldn't ever want to make it seem like it's something I could pull away from my business. It is an indispensable part of it. So, I mean, the podcast, the blog, the books I write, I have another one coming out in January, which has been like a 2.5-year effort. The YouTube channel, the Facebook group, the Facebook lives, this is all an indispensable part of the culture and education and the buy-in process and all of that. Again, something that took a lot of time to get started, took a lot of time to figure out. But if you really want to create that environment, that sticky environment, and that the environment that will not only attract people, but keep people, I think you need to have that piece in play to some extent. And you don't have to be the best at any of it, right? You just have to be good enough. I'm not the best public speaker. If that hasn't already come off as obvious right now, I don't jumble over my words too much, but I'm not like trained in any of that. So like, I'm not the greatest at any particular thing that I do, but I'm good enough at all of the stuff. And it's the combination and the cumulative effect of it that has allowed us to have the success we have with Strong On.
No, that's awesome. It's basically like, I like how you brought it back to that. Like, you don't have to be like the best. Yeah, that might be what you're shooting for, but you just have to give a shit and produce, right? Like, hey, this is what I want my message to be. This is what I believe in, and now I need to share it.
That's it, you know, and that passion is so powerful as a compensating mechanism, right? I mean, you can see it with people who they might not be great speakers, but they're so passionate in how they speak and how they talk, that is just inherently attractive. Same thing with people who just write with passion, even if they aren't, you know, the best prose stylists or something like that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I ran off of sheer passion at the beginning and total ignorance of technical nuance in all these various art forms. But it was that passion that was initially very attractive, because, like I said, people can tell that you care, that you're enthusiastic, and that's magnetic. People are pulled in by that. So don't let, if you have one other piece of advice, like, don't let the feeling that because you're not very trained at these things, I'm not a good writer, you can't let that stuff stop you, because one, it may be true, but you're never going to get better at it unless you actually start doing it. And this is a reason I hesitate to mention this, but if you go back to my YouTube channel at the very beginning, it's embarrassingly bad. It is hard. So I don't actually want anybody to do this, but just know that it's on there. do not go back to the beginning of my YouTube channel unless you really need that shot of confidence. Like, I can't look at it. My face turns all red. I'm like, what the hell is it? Like, really? I put this up there? But that's how you improve, and you just have to take that jump. You have to make that leap at some point. But I was passionate about it. So, you know, like, I was self-conscious like anybody is. You always are at some level. But you got it out there anyways. You realize that when you're that passionate about it, and most people are incredibly supportive anyways, you'll get trolls no matter how good you are. So you got to get over that. And by doing it and doing it more often, like any other skill, you will improve at it. So I keep those videos up mostly as a reminder to myself. But, you know, people I talk to, I guess sometimes they'll go back and look and like, yeah, you were really bad. I'm like, well, thanks. But I hope it's inspiring on some level.
Just put in the reps, right? And then you just eventually just share it, but then put in the reps, and then you'll get better.
Yeah, think of that mindset, right? Like, imagine if you wanted to get stronger, but you never started working out because you weren't good at working out or training. Well, how are you ever going to get stronger, right? Well, apply that to anything. Imagine you want to start doing YouTube videos, but you don't do it because you've never done YouTube videos and you're not good at camera, right? It's a self-defeating proposition. You're always going to suck at the thing that you haven't done before, but you're never going to get better at it unless you actually start doing it. You know, so there's some tricks there. You can just film stuff and just never upload it, but I think there is value in uploading it right away and getting some feedback. And here's a great thing. The thing that people fear like, people fear two things simultaneously with producing content, right? The one thing they fear is that everybody's going to hate it. And then the other thing that they fear is nobody's going to see it. Well, use that second fear to cover up that first, right? Because it's true. At first, nobody's going to see it. And then as you start to get better and better and do it more often, then more people will see it. And then at that point, you're better, so you really don't have that much to worry about. So I think that was helpful. Somebody pointed that out to me, you know, when I was hesitating a number of times, and I found that helpful.
My sleep quality.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I won't take up any more of your time.
Yeah.
I will talk to you for an hour when I said 30 minutes, but I appreciate the hell out of you. And like Sean said, like, I'm definitely a fan. Like, I use your complexes all the time. We're always reading your blogs, I read your books. Like, and the cool thing to me is, yeah, there's somebody I really respected that kind of like said your name, Dan, right? And then I investigated, but it wasn't just, okay, well, that's great that he's awesome, but there's no content for me to really read on. Like, and you have it splattered all over the place. So it's like, oh, I see why you love this guy so much, right? Like, there's all the information's in your face, and it's stuff I believe in. So I appreciate the hell out of you for jumping on the call, and hopefully we can talk again soon, and maybe even get you out here to talk to our coaches.
I'm just saying, if I get
guys, I would love it. And, you know, it's reciprocated. I really do appreciate you having me on. I would love to have this conversation again. So let's keep it going, man. This has been fun.
And you can get it.
Cool. Thanks, Pat. Have a great day too.
Nick, Sean, thank both of you.